Now, this is a tutorial that's going to show you a little bit about edge cutting, bridging, selecting things in Cinema, and building a chair. So the first thing we're going to start with is we're going to start with selecting things. We're just going to review that. So as we select things, I'm going to do it like I always do. I'm going to put an object in the world. And just to get in the habit, because we're going to do a lot of subdivision modeling, and I've shown you how to do subdivision modeling, we're also going to drop a HyperNURBS model in there. And if you remember, this is a combination between a vector object and a raster object. The raster object is the thing called cube, and the vector object is the thing called HyperNURBS. And they're going to work together. So I drop the cube inside the HyperNURBS as if you're putting a file inside of a folder. And then I'm going to make sure that I have cube selected by selecting in the object menu. I don't want to select HyperNURBS. I want to select cube. And I'm going to edit it, make it editable. Right? That changes the object from being vector to raster. Okay? Now I'm able to select faces or lines, right? Or points. Now right now the way that I'm selecting things is I've selected this tool right here, which is called Live Select. Notice as I've got it moused over, I want you to watch down here on the bottom for just a second. As I've moused over that arrow, that mouse button, it says down below Live Selection. And the other thing I want you to notice is that over here under Attributes, it also says Live Selection. And if we look at attributes for just a second, we can only select the visible elements, which means everything that is visible to us is the only thing that is available for selection. It's sensitive to the camera. Or I can unclick that and I can select things that are on the other side. And here's an example of that. If I mouse over the front facet, the one that's closest to me, keep in mind that I have this only select visible elements off. I've actually selected this one on the front side and this one on the back side. If I deselect that, if I select it and say only select visible elements, same situation. I select something on the front side, it only selects what I can see, nothing on the back side. You'll see this button repeat in other tools. You'll see this button repeat in other tools. It will ask you to only select visible elements in Knife, for example. You'll see it there. You'll see it, and we're going to cover Knife. So, I'm sorry, we're not going to cover Knife. We're going to cover Edge Cut today. All right, very nice. So, to select, once I've selected the Live Select tool, I can click outside the object and hold, and I get the brush circle. Then I can move that brush circle over the areas that I wish to select. I can also, and by clicking outside the area of the object, we deselect. I can also click independently and I can click independently, and by using the Shift key, holding it down and then selecting again, I can add to my selection. Or by using the Control key, I can take away from my selection. Okay, so you can add and subtract, add and subtract. You know, it sometimes happens, like I might, for example, I might subdivide an object and it gets really big. And from a distance, I might select 3 things when I only meant to select 1. And I'm going to teach you a new little navigation tool because whenever I do something, I always like to teach you a new thing each time. And that is I'm going to hit the S key, nothing else, just the S key. And what the S key does is it frames to the window everything that's selected. I use this as a navigation tool all the time. My mouse isn't fine enough to select the one thing I want to select. So I'll select the whole area and then hit S and get closer and then select the one thing that it was that I wanted to select. By the way, hitting the H key, which is, I tell you guys, I use this all the time. Hitting the H key, you might think of the H key as the home button. It takes the object back to the world origin. Take a look at what it did, guys. It takes the object back to the world origin. Okay, very nice. That's selection. Now, at the same time, we can do things with marquees. And we have 3 different kinds of marquees. In Cinema, all I have to do is hold my mouse button over that tab, and it makes a new window for the selectable items, selectable menu items. In this case, I have Live Selection, I have Rectangular Selection, I have Lasso Selection, and finally I have Polygon Selection. These are just different ways to do the same thing. So this works just like Photoshop. I drag and drop right over the top, and it selects everything that's underneath it. And I want you to notice that once again, this only select visible elements is reflected. So if I deselect that and I select, it turns out that it selected some things on the back side. You see that? It selected the 4 over the top, but it also selected 2 in back. So I want you to use that button very sparingly. It's an expert button. So in the beginning, I wouldn't recommend you use it. In fact, in the beginning, let's say you did want to select something all the way through. I'd select here, and then I'd rotate around to the back side, and then shift select to add to the selection. Right? Shift select. Now, we have done bridge, and I believe the way we did bridge was when we were making the chair. I'm going to show you kind of a cool aspect of bridge that I didn't show you before, because I always like to add things to my list. In this case, I'm going to drill a hole through the box by, first I'm extrude inner. You guys know how to do that, right? And then the second thing, I'm going to change the display, which we fooled around with occasionally before. I'm going to change it to lines. Now, what this does is it allows me to see, let's just zoom in a little bit. It sort of allows me to see through the object, right? And then I'm going to hit the bridge tool. Now, you know the bridge tool works by connecting one corner with another corner of 2 or more facets that you wish to interact. In this case, I told you I'm drilling a hole through the object. But I have to make sure, like, I want to make sure, we're going to do this again with the chair, but I want to make sure you know, if I go to this side or this side, these are not, I don't know what the right geometrical language for this is, but they're not lined up. So if I go over here, I get a beautiful, and let's just go ahead and turn this Gouraud shading back on, I get a beautiful hole that goes right through the object. Now I want to show you what happens when I don't do it correctly. Let's do it so that it goes from the upper left corner to the bottom left corner of the other facet. I want you to see that when we look through the hole, it doesn't work at all. Now this is something the program allows you to do, just like it allows you to extrude through the back wall of a box. In reality, you couldn't do it, but the program allows you to do it. So you guys have to be alert to things that don't make sense. And you got to stop yourself from doing them. It doesn't make sense that 2 objects would fold through themselves like that. 2 faces would fold through themselves. All right? So that's kind of cool, right? I taught you 2 things there. One was bridging, and bridging to make a hole as opposed to make a bridge or a physical object. Okay? All right, good. Now the lasso button works the same way as the lasso button works the same way. You just draw around and it selects what you draw around. And then the polygon tool is kind of cool because you can actually be very consequent in the way that you select by drawing around an object. Just get used to doing these things. Slowly but surely, once again, to learn how to do this, you just practice them. You turn them on, you say, let me see how this one works. And you just keep clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging. Usually when I say click and drag, I mean click, hold, and drag. Usually that's what I mean. Like for example, with the square marquee tool, I click, hold down the click and drag to select. It's also true though, with this, I click and hold to select. And also, but this is what's cool about the polygon tool, the polygon selection, is that I can click and then click in another place and then click in another place. And each time I'm letting off. So I don't have the requirement that the other selection tools have to click and drag and carefully select everything. By the way, hitting Shift Select works with any selection tool you choose. Live selection, marquee selection, lasso selection, etc. It works with any single one, okay? Now, to close this window, because I don't need it anymore, I can just hit this button right here in the corner. Notice that it's always there. It's always there. It always shows up. Like even if I have this deselected from, or undocked from its dock, it's still there. There's still a version of it there. So you never have to worry about getting screwed up that way, okay? Okay, fine. Now that's selection. Any other questions about selection or any other things that we did there? All right, good.